Hello, Write the Docs. It's nice to meet you. I'm Katherine, a UX writer and a pretty intense cat lady, and I am here to show you what I know about how to build influence in product design writing using documentation. So, if you dream of being in charge of a great user experience without a fancy title or asking anyone's permission, you're in the right place. Imagine opening up your favorite app. You're doing what you need to do, everything is going smoothly. You've never in your life had to Google how to do something in this blissed out usability heaven. It just works. You might never have thought about the words in this app, but chances are you're interacting with the work of a very savvy UX writer. We're the people who write the words in your beloved app. There may be more writing in there than you realize. We do everything from button copy to product descriptions to sometimes the snappy subject lines in an email. We design with words. We partner closely with product designers and product managers to make sure the overall user experience just works. Now, before I get into the how-to nitty-gritty, here's a little background on me and how I proudly faked my way into UX writing. I was a major theater nerd. And a theater major. As a director, I loved both creating the big vision and fixing the tiniest details so that everything just worked. I have a passion for process, for design, for storytelling, for deeply understanding why we wild humans do what we do. So naturally, I graduated and took that skill set into an illustrious career in customer service. About 5 years later, I fell into copywriting in a moment of pure financial panic after rage quitting a tech support job. A story for another day. Writing had always come easily to me, but now I knew it would be my trade. I knew I wanted to make the internet a better place to be with words. So before I even knew the words UX writing or content strategy, I started freelancing. Pro tip: it's helpful to know all the different job titles that apply to what you want to do. Here are some titles that can be synonyms for UX writing, but the biggest ones are content designer and content strategist right now. To start, I did mostly content marketing and technical documentation, but sometimes clients would ask me to work on the interface. That was gold to me. Directly fixing usability problems with words felt magical. I thought this was something that only coders could do or people who went to fancy design schools. I had never dreamed that a Silicon Valley CEO would ever take my design feedback seriously, but somehow I persuaded people to listen to me. My ideas made sense, my execution was good, and crucially, my documentation was credible. I thought I was faking it, but I was also making it. Today, 5 years after the rage quit that changed everything, I've worked for several major tech companies. I've worked on teams that are mature, teams that are brand new babies. I've built programs and frameworks and educated hundreds of designers about how to write well, or at least a little less badly. Through it all, I've learned that you've got to be scrappy. So today I'm going to share with you some of the simple yet effective documentation techniques I use to manage the chaos that is UX writing. Now, if you're wondering, how hard can UX writing really be? Just pick accurate labels. How bad could interface copy get? I'd like to take a second to illustrate what can go wrong. A colleague of mine recently ordered tacos from his favorite spot on a popular food delivery app, which shall remain unnamed, but not unscreen capped. The app asked him, "Remove any toppings?" Capital T. The question was followed by a list of excellent taco topping options next to checkboxes. What was the right thing to do for a person who, yes, indeed, wanted all the toppings? Checked or unchecked? Usually checking a checkbox means opting in, but in this case we're opting into a removal kind of situation. It was confusing, to say the least. He decided to check the boxes. All the toppings were invited to this party. Or so he thought. Sadly, 30 to 50 minutes later, utterly naked carne asada tacos showed up at his door. I know that sad, meat-only tacos are really devastating, but the stakes get even higher in other industries. Imagine the potential consequences of unclear or unkind copy when you're writing for financial products, or worse yet, healthcare systems. In other words, this shit matters. Many crucial design problems can be avoided if a UX writer can just break through and influence the design before it gets released into the wild. Sadly, fixing these kinds of issues all across the whole internet is not going to be easy. Here's why. UX writers are operating under huge constraints. First, we're almost universally understaffed. When I recently interviewed for jobs, my first question was always, what's the ratio of writers to designers? Best case, you're looking at 1-3, 1-5. Often it's 1-10, 1-15, or more. It's common for a big design team to spin up, build whole product ecosystems, and start to mature before there's even one headcount for UX writing. And then there's a disaster area on our hands. When a writer does come on the scene, we're often walking into oceans of backlogs, tangled knots of poor content design decisions that are repeated ad nauseum for consistency. Because of this bleak ratio problem, projects often won't get the UX writer's full attention. Some may be a cursory proofread before you head out the door. Others, sorry, they can't be a priority. And that means people on your own team might not understand what you do. And it's not their fault. If you're working fast, throwing band-aids on issues right and left, your team is not getting the full UX writing treatment their designs deserve. Add it all up, and we're tired. Jonathan Coleman, the design manager at Intercom, has a great talk on these issues and how to solve them that I seriously recommend if you're interested in UX writing or content design as a discipline. He has a really bold vision for a one-to-one designer-to-writer world. But in the meantime, in the messy real world that we're working with, good documentation can help a writer out. It may be tempting to jump from fire to fire, sprinkling your edits over as many projects as possible, but that doesn't help establish your credibility as a practitioner. Edits and recommendations without underlying documentation are easy for others to ignore, overwrite, and to rationalize away. I'm going to show you tips on how to create documentation that's persuasive, documents that build your power and credibility that get shared around. And most importantly, documents that help decision makers understand how great UX writing benefits the intended audience. But before we start, who are we influencing here exactly? Well, depending on the size of your organization, UX writers could be interacting with any of these roles, from design to marketing, all the way up the food chain. You would be shocked at the number of people who have a big stake in the words we use in product, for whom writing is not really their expertise at all. As a UX writer, you could very well be reporting to a supervisor who's a design manager, who may or may not fully understand what you do. So it's your job to make it more clear for everybody. This isn't easy, but docs can help. Let's say you've just joined an organization or a team and you see that the UX copy is a hot, steaming dumpster fire mess. Doesn't seem to bother anybody else, but this content is bugging you all the way out. How might you get the clearance to address existing hair on fire content issues with so many other projects pulling at your attention? Well, everybody loves a content audit. Audits are great for quantifying what's going on with the words, which can be a little tricky, identifying opportunities for high impact revisions or additions to existing content, and finally building principles that everyone can use going forward to raise the bar on content quality, even when you're not there in the room as the writer. If you've never worked with content audits before, I really recommend checking out Megan Casey's book, The Content Strategy Toolkit. It's full of detailed resources for how to run a totally professional audit operation. She guides you through defining the criteria and scope of your audit, how to incorporate user testing, how to assess the content and document your findings. She also helps you reframe problems as opportunities. And finally, she shows you how to build a rock-solid argument for allocating resources to the problems you've uncovered. However, in the real, messy, hellaciously understaffed world of UX writing, you'd better believe shortcuts will be involved. Last summer, I had the opportunity to piggyback onto an existing design audit at LinkedIn. The audit was being conducted by a very talented design intern who was looking at all the emails that get sent to you when you're looking for work on LinkedIn. When I say that I piggybacked, that's code for I got an intern to do all my data entry and I high-fived a million angels. A redesign of some of these emails was slated for the fall, so this audit was more about defining design principles than making a business case. While the project wouldn't receive direct UX writing support, this audit was an opportunity to get UX writing's voice heard, to get our recommendations enshrined in that project's kickoff. I wanted to assess how well the content was working for users, but I had limited time. So sadly, no room for user research. So here's how we got scrappy. I had the intern run each email through a reading level measurement tool. You can use Hemingway, Word, or whatever to flag any egregious, complex language. Now, these tools aren't perfect, but they can help you quantify your findings. Luckily, we didn't run into anything too complicated, so we checked that off of our list of concerns. We already knew a lot about how job seekers felt about using LinkedIn, so I reviewed that research and kept it in mind when reviewing the content. In my review, which legit only took a couple of hours because the intern had beautifully set up the spreadsheet for me, I was able to document a bunch of cut and dried copy problems, things like terminology inconsistencies and issues with our voice and tone. But what really stood out to me was the power of seeing all these emails side by side. It was no wonder folks were confused. We had different emails that looked very similar. We were failing to clearly articulate the reasoning behind our recommendations, and we definitely weren't offering a whole lot in the way of education, which we knew people are hungry for. Overall, the emails felt terse, transactional, not helpful. I wrote notes on each email and rolled up my high-level findings into a one-pager, which I passed back to the blessed intern. So what happened? Well, when I saw the intern's final presentation, I was obsessed. Most of her design recommendations were based on the content audit results. Turns out, biggest design wins could have come from improving the quality of the content. Surprise! Next, while this audit had a narrow scope, remember, it was only looking at emails for job seekers. Our design director pointed out that these findings might very well be applicable to all emails across LinkedIn. She suggested sharing these principles more widely outside of our design group. And finally, this audit was a way of making sure that my strategic voice would end up in the room with product managers and product marketing folks who would ultimately rewrite many of these emails. While obviously it would be better to have a dedicated writer on this project, this audit turned into a way for me to scale my influence, to let my insights live on beyond me while I was busy with other projects. Next, I'm going to share one of my favorite techniques for resolving disagreements about how content should be arranged. Sometimes there's an argument about how to arrange information on a particular screen or within a flow. What should come first? What should be in the headline? What should be in the body copy? Or sometimes you've got a too much content problem. You've edited this thing down as far as you can go, but you still can't make it work in the space you've got. What helps in both these situations is to zoom all the way out, away from specific design choices, and decide together with your partners in design, marketing, product management, whoever, on a communication hierarchy. So let's imagine we're redesigning the content on this screen. We're in a working session with marketing, research, design, and product management, all together in a design rumble. Marketing is in love with the tagline they came up with and validated with a survey they ran outside the product context. They think that's the number one most important thing. The product manager doesn't really see what's wrong with the design, but only because they're so close to the product. Essential points that are obvious to them seem never to have made it into the content design. The researcher has just learned specifics about how people are interacting with this page, what questions they've got, and where they're getting lost, but they don't feel comfortable making strong content recommendations based on all this incredible knowledge. And that's where you come in. Your designer trusts you and is just hoping this meeting doesn't take too long. So how might you, UX writer, in this personality clashing pressure cooker, figure out how to get everyone to agree? It's as simple as making a numbered list. First, you list all the things you're trying to communicate in this particular screen or flow. Don't try to make this list well written. You're just trying to explicitly state every single thing the user needs to know in this piece of your design. Next, put them in order of importance. There will be controversy in this step, but generally it's easier to agree about this outside the context of your design and any potential possessive creative feelings. This list kind of magically changes people's perspective. It forces them to reckon with what it is that's actually important and why. Pro tip, user research beats gut feelings every time. Next, ask yourself, does all of this information really belong here in this specific context, this specific screen or flow? You might find that some of your lower down list items don't make the cut or belong elsewhere in your design, somewhere else more contextually relevant. Once everyone agrees on the list, you can reapproach the design following the hierarchy guidance you just co-created. So, list item number 1 is probably your headline or CTA, something high up in the hierarchy. Your list items might not necessarily plug into the design in linear order, but it should be a big red flag for you if item number 2 is buried in little gray help text or beneath a tooltip. As you work through your list, maybe even more inessential things drop off as you plug in potential copy variations. Or maybe you find a genius way to cleverly, concisely combine 2 points, at which point everybody in the meeting applauds. My point is, things just really fall into place when you get partners thinking outside the confines of what has been done before and agreed on goals. And bonus, this list with everyone's names attached is documentation you can use to back up your work in design critiques later. If an executive starts questioning your headline, you can pull out the list and ask, do you disagree with this hierarchy we decided on as a team? And then you'll enjoy a more productive conversation than usual. So sometimes you've really got to bring people along. If you're dealing with folks who are far, far away from you on the org tree, who may not really get what you do, they're the people who tend to look at your design and say, but have you thought about doing it this other random way? Well, with copy docs, you can say, yes, would you like to see my other explorations? Copy docs are pretty simple. They're like a content playground, a testing area where you can try different variations without feeling encumbered by fitting everything into a design. They're a Google Doc with a table in it where you write words. That's it. Andrea Druge wrote a great article about how you might lay your copy doc out, and you should check it out if you're interested in knowing more about this. While eventually your UX copy is going to live in a design file, it's awesome to keep a copy doc around, documenting all the variations you played with, notes about your rationale, and anything else that's helpful to you. Copy docs are a great tool for keeping your early stage projects organized and can be especially helpful to your partners in other departments who may struggle to imagine what different copy choices might look like. People feel a lot better about making a final decision on copy when they're able to compare different versions side by side. It doesn't matter if your first draft was bomb, they want to see another version to feel good about it. And finally, copy docs are so helpful when you've got an executive or someone else high up the chain questioning your choices. Pulling this thing up and showing them how well thought out your work is a slam dunk. I want to point out a couple of things that you can do in copy docs to help bring people along with your design decisions. First off, you don't have to read this whole slide. The content's not important. It's about the layout. So in the second column, under copy explorations, you can see I've offered an A, B, and C version and bolded the variation that I prefer. This is great for stakeholders who have an I'll know it when I see it vibe. Just having something to compare makes them trust your final choices more. Sometimes we'll take elements from version A, combine them with version C, create a version D that everyone loves. All of a sudden, because we have access to a limited, manageable slate of viable options, FOMO melts away and you can all move forward. Next, in a third column, you'll see that I'm articulating both the recommendation and the rationale. It helps to be your own biggest critic. Being able to identify the potential pros and cons of different versions of content is a superpower you can use to buttress your recommendations. I like to use the recommendation space to articulate the why, not just the what. After all, you'll probably forget by the time this stuff gets around to development handover. See if you can answer these questions. What do we sacrifice if we go with my recommendation? What do we gain? Being able to preemptively answer those questions about your own work will help make design critiques much smoother down the road. Now, if you're dealing with stakeholders who are subject matter experts, think legal. The work can be extra sensitive. A tiny change in phrasing could do real harm to your audience and expose your company to risk. The good news is, lawyers aren't infallible. The words they recommend are important, but they aren't blessed. Their first pass at recommended language isn't necessarily the only way. But how do you convince somebody to come around when they're used to their word being, kind of like law? Lawyers are human beings. Like all human beings, they love it when you come to them really trying to understand their perspective. In the olden days, I'd be sure to find them in their offices for a little friendly chit-chat. Then I'd ask questions about their perspective and concerns before getting down to the specifics of a particular hot-button disclosure statement. And it made such a difference. I get the sense that they're so used to being treated like the bad guys, the dream killers, the puppy kickers, whatever, that they're psyched when somebody actually comes to them wanting to respect their expertise and work within their guidelines. Legal review is not where great ideas go to die, although plenty of bad ideas do get filtered out there. The truth is, our subject matter experts, be they lawyers or doctors or financial experts, are there to help us not fuck it up. They're just people doing their best to reduce risk, create more ethical products, and do right by the users, the humans who deserve to know about the product they're interacting with. When you take that seriously as a writer, you'll be surprised what kind of edits you can get approved. So I'm going to show you a technique that can help you arrive at accurate, readable, and legally approved copy in a short amount of time in a way that builds trust with your subject matter experts. And you do it using nothing more than a highlighter. Well, in Google Docs, because you need all the colors. Here's how it works. I'll highlight the original content in different colors for each essential thought or point. If the prose is messy or jumbled, I'll use my best judgment. Then beneath that, I'll provide my best effort at a plain language rewrite, cutting as close to the bone as possible, using the same highlighter colors to code the content by thought. This helps keep me honest and shows others that I'm actively working to maintain the integrity of their advice. Once the document is ready, I'll then invite the subject matter expert into a working session. We all pile in the Google Doc and the Zoom room and focus on the essential questions. Does the revised content carry the same meaning as the original? Does it present any additional risks that need to be mitigated? What would need to change in order to approve this revision? By asking these questions and engaging with your partner directly, not over email, a writer can show that they value their partner's expertise. The rewrite isn't a criticism, it's an attempt to honor and even more clearly encapsulate their advice. Your legal partner can then, in real time, help you understand how to write more compliant copy, while at the same time you show them how great legalese can sound when you translate it into plain language. I think you'll discover this can be a completely symbiotic relationship. All this said, I am not a legal expert. Your legal experts are legal experts. They get the final say on what's okay and what's not. But talking them into plain language writing, I'm pretty sure is above board. So, what did we learn today? First, documentation is a busy UX writer's best friend. If you've got time to write a button, you've got time to write why you wrote the button the way you did. Next, content audits help make it abundantly clear where the UX writing opportunities are. This can help you get resources to better do your job. Designers and design managers simply aren't trained to understand content problems the way you do. You've got to show them the way. Next, you can use lists to make hierarchy and prioritization choices. It's a great forcing function to help designers, product managers, and marketing folks agree on the top priorities for each screen or flow. You can use copy docs to show important people that, yes, I explored several options, and yes, there are reasons why the words are done this way. Finally, your legal partners love to be manipulated into better writing. All you do is force them to look very closely at their own jargon and think about what they've done. I'm kidding. But no, they really sincerely like it. Before I finish, I'll close with one more observation. People often accuse UX writers of being, I quote, magical or a unicorn, some kind of mystical creature who sprinkles English language fairy dust over ugly, problematic content, making all our troubles melt away. But I think it's important to bust this myth. Writing good words for products isn't about bringing the magic. Sorry, Mr. Unicorn. It's about ruthless prioritization, pragmatic politicking, and okay, maybe a little magic. But really, it's about knowing who you're writing for and showing what they're trying to do. It's about showing your work, the why behind the what. Documentation works for UX writers because it lives on beyond the working session. It'll get passed around. It'll let your ideas circulate, even when you absolutely cannot make another meeting. Thank you very much. You can equip your partners with this documentation so they can make your case for you. A true blessing when you're stretched across so many projects. That is real influence. It's important to remember that everybody thinks they're a UX writer. I found that you have to embrace this quality about people, grab onto what's great about their feedback, and help them understand better what they don't yet know about UX writing. As the resident word expert, it's your job to get people to agree about what successful UX copy might look like. And documentation can play a major part in getting to that agreement. So enjoy your newfound soft power, your now slightly more visible influence. Now, if this talk made you excited at all about UX writing, please check out the resources I've name-checked here. I've also got a few extra book recommendations if you're curious about moving toward product writing and product design. It's a very exciting time to be in this field. The books are literally still being written. And finally, absolutely hit me up on LinkedIn. You can use this QR code to find my profile. I'm running UX writing mentorship sessions through adplist.org, and you can find me there if you're interested in having a chat one-on-one. I love talking to people about UX writing careers. I came here circuitously, and I so enjoy helping others find their way in what is a really interesting and challenging profession. Plus, I just love hanging out with word nerds. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this talk. I think what I saw in the chat was people really loved, like, in addition to the CAD and the theater stuff, like just the fact that I think we all have some sort of design idea or UX idea in the back of our heads and overlap with tech writing. And it's really nice to kind of explore that and the processes that come with that in more detail. I saw some love for obviously the cat gifts and also some love for the incredibly hard work that interns do and deserve all the recognition and money for. So that was really great. Yes. Awesome. So we've got some questions coming in. Taryn asks, for those that have made the transition from tech writer to UX writer, how do you go from being an unofficial UX writer because there's nobody else to do it to a full-time UX writer?
Oh, man. Probably get a new job is the answer. That's almost always my answer. Yeah, if you're working in an organization where you're able to like squeeze in those great UX writing projects and use them as portfolio pieces, you can definitely like leverage that to go get more freelance work on the side or, you know, get your new job with your shiny official title. I think it's just really important to be sure to brand yourself as a UX writer in your job search if that's what you want to do next. And trust me, like there's so much demand for this niche profession right now. Like if you have your branding on point, like you'll get recruiter calls. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And good luck to anybody who's watching who might be interested in that and giving it a shot. Brick asks, how can tech writers helpfully suggest copy to designers or UX designers without stepping on toes?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like if they're legit, they'll love your suggestions. I mean, like folks who are doing tech writing have like deep knowledge of what are the problems with the product because they're writing about it and they're evaluating tickets all day. So I would say like, hey, I've noticed this issue and I think I have some ideas, like can we talk about it? Or, you know, just make that friendly connection. And I think any UX writer or designer worth their salt will want to engage with you on that because you have subject matter expertise.
Yeah, for sure. The questions are just pouring in right now. It's awesome to see. Tammy is wondering, have you ever worked with designers who are averse to adding more than a few words to the page? This is something that Tammy's seen their UX writer encounter.
That's funny because I think that's about what I'm leaping into. This is like my second week at Squarespace.
Oh, hey, congratulations.
Thank you. So they're known for being quite minimal. And I've already like seen some things where I'm like, oh, I don't know what that word means, or don't know that anyone else will know what you're doing with that. But yeah, I think the proof is always in the pudding. You know, try and get it in front of users. Try and prove out your hypothesis that someone might not understand this thing without a label. You know, obviously, like the best cues are ones that are, you know, in multiple different formats. You know, are we giving a good visual indication? Are we using color? But obviously color is not enough ever. Like, are we using text that's helpful, and alt text labels? All of that kind of plays together well.
Yeah, for sure. Mike is wondering, can you tell us more about your recommended ratio? So UX writers to product designers, what's the basis for maybe 1-to-1 or 1-to-3?
Yeah. I mean, I think 1-to-1 ultimately it's like a beautiful dreamland, but real talk, Intercom then laid off a lot of all their content designers. So it was kind of seen as like an easy cost cutting measure. I think, I don't know, I'm speculating here. So I mean, I think a writer can conceivably like stretch between, 1 and 3 designers if needed. I've worked on teams where that's the case, and it's not too bad. But it can get really stressful depending on what else you're doing, because a lot of the time, if you're on a small team, you're dealing with not just the ratio of designers to writers. You're also dealing with, well, how do I educate people about what I do? How do I advocate for this role? There's all kinds of like infrastructure work that needs to happen, just like on a design system. You would need designers just working on like, what are the components, what are the standards. So yeah, I mean, it's just in my experience, working with anywhere from 1 to 3 designers is really ideal, because any more than that, and it's like you can barely touch each project during the week. So it's less fun.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. We've had a couple of questions about sort of where UX writers and tech writers can kind of fit together in an organization. So Jennifer is wondering, like, what kinds of organizational relationships have you seen between the two groups? And Manfred was asking, and thank you to Christy for making sure we saw it with the little Q prompt, should they be on one team? So what have you seen? What do you think works?
I mean, I've seen a lot of silos. I've seen a lot of, we barely talk to each other. Obviously, like UX writers are really closely aligned with design, and that's like their most important relationship. But then you've also got the situation where it's like the technical writer is then being co-opted into doing UX copy because maybe they haven't staffed that position yet. So I think I haven't really seen any like happy medium between those two options.
I appreciate your honesty, though.
Right? But I think it would be cool to see closer collaboration and just create touch points and like regular meetings with the other documentation people, because like the word nerds, they need to get together and
Yeah.
share their struggles.
For sure. We had a couple of questions from Rachel and a couple of others in the chat. Do you have examples of good UX writing style guides? Do you have favorites you can share?
Yes. Okay. MailChimp, everyone is in love with it. Look that up. Intuit also, I believe, has made their guidance public. And I worked on that team for a little while, and it was just lovely guidance. I always felt very like I understood, what was going on and all the rules. Those are kind of my top ones, but style guides are kind of fun because you can kind of pick and choose what goes in there, what's helpful for your brand. I love doing, voice and tone work too, just to kind of help hone that stuff in. So yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And speaking of style guides, Jessica is wondering how much overlap you see between UX writing guidelines and doc style guides. Have you worked with content design systems that integrate UI and docs copy best practices together?
So interesting. I don't think I have seen that, but they totally should talk to each other because so many of the principles are going to be the same, right? Like use descriptive headings, use bullet points. We love them. Yeah, no, I haven't really seen that combined too much.
Mm-hmm. It's a cool idea, though, I think.
Right?
Yeah.
Like all get together in a jamboree and.
Yeah, totally. Radina, I hope I'm saying your name right, has a question. Do you have people from internationalization teams participate in the copy audits so you can flag issues in the UX strings that might cause problems?
Yeah, I actually have done an audit. I did another audit on inclusive language issues where I partnered really closely with localization. That's always really interesting. Generally speaking, the rule is if you go into cleaner, plainer English writing, you're already making the work of localization a whole lot easier with just a few basic rules of avoid idioms. And there will, of course, be certain words and phrases that you might want to flag for yourselves that cause issues for localization. So yeah, including those partners is really great. Anytime you've got a chance to reset how things are done, in an audit, it's good to, kind of check all the boxes, and localization is one.
Yeah, great point though. Simple is always best. You can't go wrong with that.
I know, right?
So one last question, and I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all of them, but one before we just squeak out of time. What do you recommend? This is from Manfred. What do you recommend to bridge users from the UI and the UX to the deeper details in the documentation?
Ooh, descriptive links. Learn more needs to die. It needs to go away. We all know this, but it's really hard because we've got so many products with so many millions of learn more links. Gosh, I mean, that's really on us in design. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, what's behind this learn more link in your design? And the answer is, oh, a link to the help center. And I'm like, wrong answer. We know exactly which article we're linking to, and we need to know that there's a reason for it. We can't just throw these links in willy-nilly hoping that they're going to fix all of our problems. Ideally, we've solved many of the problems in product, and the learn more link, or the not learn more link after we write it correctly, will be more specific.
Yes, and Brooke brings up an excellent point in the chat. It's less useful for screen readers for accessibility purposes because if they have to scroll through the same link over and over to find something that they actually wanted to click on, it can take so long. So
yeah, that's exactly why. Thanks for context.
Well, thank you again, Katherine. This was such a great talk. People seem to really enjoy it. I'm just seeing so much love in the chat and really engaged questions. So thank you for coming in and sharing this with us. We really appreciated watching it.
Thank you so much. And genuinely, hit me up on LinkedIn if you have more questions about UX writing. I love chatting with folks about it. Thank you so much for having me.